Hey guys, how's it going? This is Jagger with Reconsurco. In today's video, we're going to be going over how to build a good Cobra Hood ghillie suit. The Cobra Hood is basically just a more small, kind of compact version of a full-size ghillie. For this video, we're just going to be using a Cammie top. That's basically all you'll need. I'll go over the gear list after this. But yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces of kit. Just because it's super compact, I can put it in any pouch I need to, cargo pocket, and yeah, it's perfect for PB ops, RNS missions, anything like that that you kind of just need to quickly apply camouflage or at least be concealed, whether you're in a hide site or on patrol or in an LPOP or whatever it is. Cobra Hood ghillie suit is a super essential piece of gear. In this video, I'm going to be going over a couple kind of tips and tricks on what I do to add to my Cobra Hood. You can buy store-bought ones. Some of them are good, some of them are lower quality. They still do get the job done. But yeah, if you're interested in building your own, go ahead, we'll get into this this video here. Alright guys, so in this video I do kind of go pretty fast, so I recommend watching the entire video before you get your supplies. If you need to, go ahead, pause this video to kind of copy down some of this stuff. Alright guys, so the first step, basically all you have to do, just get your Cammie top, lay it out. From there, get a chalk pencil or a Sharpie, and you're going to just basically add some guidelines. Guidelines need to be just a little bit below the elbows and then kind of across the waist / sternum area. You can kind of see right here, I did this little kind of guideline, and then as you cut them out, just like you see right here, you have that kind of V shape up towards the sternum, but you're going to keep all this in one piece. Now this area is super important right here. You want to make sure that you cut both sides, basically making your blouse into two different pieces. You're going to sew in your vents and also kind of resize the arms. So right here you can see I saved that sleeve piece, and basically all I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut right down it, making kind of use of as much of that wasted fabric or that leftover fabric as I possibly can. And you're just going to basically lay it down. Make sure that it's an equal kind of size compared to that, and you want to match them up to where when you do sew these in, you're basically putting camo to camo with the pattern. If you do camo to the non-pattern side, you're going to kind of get this weird funky line, and you're going to try to hide that stitch. So again, right here you can see I'm lining them up, basically putting camo to camo side, and I'm going to sew that right down that line. So once you sewed and you kind of increase the size of that sleeve, again, this is just something that I've always found to work better, especially if I'm throwing it over kit or my uniform. But once you've done that, now we'll talk about adding the shock cord into it. So basically all you do, you're going to cut a piece of shock cord that'll stretch the entire length of that sleeve all the way open. You're going to lay it in just on the perimeter of that sleeve, the end of that sleeve, roll that edge over, and from there just sew it in, making kind of like a small tunnel or a path for that shock cord to sit in there. It's super important that you guys are kind of checking this ever so often. If you have a sewing machine, it's going to be a little bit easier, a little bit quicker than doing it by hand. You do not want to glue this. You'll have to sew this in to make this a fully functional part of your ghillie suit. So once it's complete, go ahead, kind of do a functions test on it. Leave, I'd say 6 to 8 inches, maybe a little less, hanging out both ends, and just go ahead, test and make sure that it's working just how you want it to. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about adding the mesh vent below basically your armpits on your sides there. Again, just like the sleeves, this isn't an absolute necessity, but it does kind of open up the Cobra Hood itself. It's better for wearing, you know, over a play carrier or something like that. And when you do sew on the mesh, just like you did with the sleeve expansion, you're going to try to sew this to where you can hide that stitch. Also, you know, maybe after the fact add some shoe goo or something like that to kind of reinforce you know, this stitch, because the mesh is going to be pretty weak, and you know, this is along with a couple other things, this could be a potential fail point with prolonged use of the ghillie suit. Another thing too to consider, if you guys do have a sewing machine, you don't need a super fancy one to make this Cobra Hood. But if you do have a sewing machine, it's not going to hurt going over these stitches, 2 or 3 times just to kind of reinforce it and, give it that added strength, because these are abused pretty hard. Another thing too, depending on how much mesh you guys did use, you'll have a little bit of excess, going up into the actual ghillie suit. That's totally fine. Just roll it over and you can trim it with scissors. Once you have that done, you can kind of see right here how it looks a little hidden. I left one side exposed just so you guys can kind of see the difference. Again, it's not going to make or break it. It's more of a cosmetic type thing. And with your sleeves, you want to, again, make sure that they're fully functional. If you put a stitch in there, you accidentally glue it or something, it's going to totally ruin the design. But yeah, right here you'll be able to see the closest stitch to the center of my chest towards my sternum. That is the one that is not rolled over, and the one more closer to my back, that is the one that I decided to hide the stitch on and stuff. You should be able to kind of see it here in a little bit. So again, right here you can kind of see the fraying on that front stitch. Shock cord is basically tightening that sleeve and loosening that sleeve. I'll get to a way to retain that later, but here's kind of a better view of those stitches. So now that you've kind of finished all the shock cord installation around the waist and around both sleeves, we'll kind of break down a couple different ways to do this. Your first method, you can just trim them, tie simple knots in them. But to kind of prolong the use of those knots, all you got to do, just get some 1/4 inch shrink tubing, and you can slip those over there just above your cord lock. Tie a knot just like you would, and then basically just pull that shrink tubing over that knot, burn it, and it'll definitely prolong the life of those knots. Those knots seem to take a beating, and after a while they'll either wear off or come undone. Unless you're tying them really tight or adding glue or anything like that. So that shrink tube just kind of adds an extra layer to them. If you guys are new to using shrink tube and stuff like that, you don't want to use a ton of heat, just kind of a quick once over until it shrinks around it. If you do it too long, it'll start to get kind of like this charred look to it, and it'll smoke. That's when you know it's kind of ruined in a sense, become very brittle. After you got that all done, you can kind of just go in, trim up any of those like extra strings and stuff hanging out, and burn the ends and stuff like that of that fabric around there. Also, if you guys are curious on where to get the cord locks or any of the shock tubing or anything like that, you can find a lot of it online. Amazon usually has it for a relatively cheap price. They're not super expensive. I think you can get like a 4-pack or a 10-pack, and they're like a really nice little piece of kit you can kind of have on you if you need to, use it for boonies or for shoelaces or for ghillie suits or anything like that. I kind of have it in a little repair kit. I usually carry those on me as well. Alright, so now we kind of get into the building of the hood. Not going to lie, the hood's pretty tricky. It is going to kind of take some trial and error on your part. For this, again, if you guys did cut your Cammie top the way I showed you, you can use that little thin piece of scrap to kind of go around the perimeter where what's going to be closest to your face, and that kind of reinforces it and gives it a little bit more structure. And from here, basically what you can do kind of as an added modification like you've seen on the boonies, you can add some chicken wire in that brim to kind of give it some structure and whatnot. Just kind of a tip I usually do. The last little part you want to add is a small strip, again, used from that piece of leftover fabric you had from your Cammie. And this is going to kind of rest just along the inside of the hood and kind of support your head. All right, make sure that you roll over the edge and sew those as well to kind of clean it up and make sure it doesn't fray and stuff like that. But this will be sewn tight to the mesh on the inside, and let that mesh be on the outside of your hood. All right, so now we're going to go over kind of adding netting and the fishnet and stuff like that to your ghillie. So first thing you want to do, if you're going to do the 550 paracord, you want to cut at least 25 even pieces if you're going to do like a 5x5. And I do those squares anywhere from 2.5 to 3 inches. You can do them tighter or bigger. It just kind of depends on what your goal is for that. If you have enough fishing net, or you can get your hand on enough fishing net, that's also a method you can use on the back. But make sure when you are doing this paracord method on the back, you anchor down, whether it's shoe goo or spider wire or sewing machine, whatever you do, you want to anchor down these points as best as you possibly can. Take the time, don't half-ass it, because if you do, it's just going to fail on you. You're going to have, you know, a bunch of vegetation and stuff like that hanging off you all stupid. For the ghillie suits as well, guys, again, it is a time-consuming process, but the more you put into it, the longer they're going to last. Any of those anchor points, add glue to them if you can. And now we'll get into kind of the front of the ghillie. On the front right here, I'm probably going to just use this fish net. It's honestly a really easy method to do. You can go in and tack it down with a spider wire by hand, or using a sewing machine, or a combination of that and gluing it. I like to keep the pockets on the front open. Some guys will completely remove the pockets, but again, for the Cobra Hood, it's just going to be something that I pull out quickly, throw on. Maybe I have, you know, strip maps or something, and I'm not too real worried about crawling on my stomach while I'm in my Cobra Hood. But again, you know, depending on what situation you are, you might have to. Here you can see I'm just kind of anchoring these down. It's going to take quite a few spots because the fish net is kind of flimsy, I guess you could say, and it is weaker than the paracord for sure. But you have a lot more opportunity to tie in jute and 550 and you know, add in different types of stuff like that, especially if it fails, as opposed to the paracord one. It is a lot more durable if you do take the time to do it right. But, you know, if you do have fail points, you only have 25 grids, you know, as opposed to however many are in these sections of the fish net. If you guys do end up hand sewing the fish net on, or any of your paracord or anything like that of the ghillie suit, and you do decide to add shoe goo to it, make sure that while it's still wet, you add, you know, a little spray of tan spray paint or some sand or something like that, and mix it up in there while it's still kind of gooey, to break up that shiny texture that it will have when it dries. Again, you know, this is kind of the final product. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your goal is to just break up those V's under both armpits, and then the V's on both sides of your head. Alright guys, the best part of it all, stripping jute. This is a super time-consuming process depending on how you do it, whether you have sandbags. The super easy kind of method that I found, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that and you go to the garden section, you can get big rolls of this, and I just cut it in kind of like 1.5-foot chunks, in square chunks. And basically all I'm going to do, you can either strip it by hand. If it is kind of a weird section of it, you might have to use like a fork or something to strip it. But other than that, your goal is just kind of get a decent sized pile. Again, with my ghillie suit or with my Cobra Hood or whatever you're using, the jute is just kind of like a filler. It's not supposed to cover the entire thing. You don't want to cover your entire ghillie suit in jute like you see in movies or whatever. And it's not going to be a good time. You're going to suffer. All right, cool. Next little piece we'll go over is 550. All right, so when I'm doing my 550, this is kind of a fast method that I've, you know, found over doing this so many times. You can get like a little hook or something, hook the 550 onto it, wrap it a few times, just so you can get a bunch of even pieces together. Slide your scissors in the bottom, snip it, and then same thing with the top. Go ahead, do that, and you can repeat this process a few times, and it'll just give you a nice kind of clean pile of 550. Once you have your two piles of jute and 550, it's time to start placing it in. I personally like to do the 550 first, just so I can make sure that I cover as much of the ghillie suit as possible. For the back, for the 550 kind of netting type deal I did, I'm doing one near every anchor point. I don't want to do them in the middle, because for the 550 paracord, you're going to be using these to tie in heavy vegetation and stuff like that. The jute can be tied in the middle because it's not going to be really bearing any type of load for the Cobra Hood. For the 550 as well, you want to make sure that those end lengths are, I'd say 6 to 9 inches at least in length. So that means, your whole piece needs to be at least 12 to 18 inches to kind of make up for that overlap. And after you've added all your 550 in, we'll get to the jute. Just small amounts. If you do too much, it's going to clump up and make these big balls. And, after the break-in, a lot of it's going to be gone anyways. So try to do it, as frequent as you possibly can, but in these small little sections. It's just going to kind of help the overall look of the ghillie suit, especially when you add vegetation and stuff in there. It gives it kind of that depth and that added texture to the entire thing. Another thing too to think about when it comes to jute, I notice a lot of these places have like dyed packs of jute, or you can get different dyed packs online and stuff like that. It's best to try to keep it as light of a color as possible, because you can always go darker rather than getting a dark green or a dark gray color jute and then trying to make it lighter. It's just going to be a pain in the ass, and it's a really difficult process to do. So try to stick with that burlap sack or that jute you can get at Home Depot or something like that. Alright guys, so that kind of wraps it up. Here's kind of what the finished Cobra Hood basically looks like. Again, when you guys are building out your ghillie suits, whether it's a Cobra Hood or a full ghillie or some of the other modifications we'll do in the future, you want to be more worried about adding as much paracord, 550 paracord, rather than just making it a jute monster, right, as we like to say. If you add a bunch of jute, when it gets wet, and when you're doing the break-in and stuff like that, you'll automatically know it's twice as heavy, if not more, right? Just because that jute absorbs all of the water. And on top of that, you're going to be more worried about blending in to your immediate surrounding, and then maybe the surrounding of what you're patrolling up to. So the tie-ins are going to be really essential when it comes to this piece. All right, guys. So that wraps it up for our Cobra Hood ghillie suit build. If you guys have any questions about your own build out, or you plan on building one and you have questions, go ahead, hit us in the comments below. Love to answer questions. Love to talk to you guys. I always appreciate the support. If you guys got something out of this video, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. It really means a lot to us. And stay tuned. We got Evade Minis coming to the site soon. So that's all I got for you.